Hello, everyone. This is your host for today's digital transition discussion, Leilani Cawthon. I'm the CEO of the Learning Counsel News Media and Research Organization and also a proud Edu Jedi Grandmaster. So we're going to get started here today. Let's go. So challenges that St. Paul Public Schools has never dreamed of navigating. Can't wait to hear this. Super excited. I'm going to put myself off camera and on mute. Do you want to share a screen?
I am just going to share. Don't really have a presentation. A superintendent without a PowerPoint. I know it's amazing.
That's amazing and awesome. Okay, well then I'll stay on camera so that, if you want me to just interject or whatever,
Sure.
I can. And then we can sort of make it dialogue-ish. Love it. So let's roll.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to share with you today. I just thought that in looking at what we've talked about, and first of all, I should say that the picture that you see on the screen is in fact me. I know it looks a little bit different, but I do want to share that, we have focused so much on our school reopening and our plans and obviously this world that's changed around us. But within that, I think that there's a story in St. Paul that's a little bit compelling to some of the greater leadership challenges that each of us have faced as individuals in organizations, personally and professionally. For that matter. So I was compelled to share just a bit more with you today. And again, this is meant to be very informal. So if there are things that you'd like to share, questions that you have, please interrupt at any time. Use the chat feature, however you'd like to do that. I am the superintendent of St. Paul Public Schools, just to give a very brief snapshot, 36,000 students. 80% of our students are identified students of color. Around 80% also qualify for free and reduced price meals. We have a beautiful 32% of our students qualify for English language services, 130 languages and dialects spoken. It is truly a uniquely diverse community that I'm part of and the district that I get to lead. It is my fourth year here. I'd spent the previous 4 years in Burnsville and Savage, Minnesota, so my eighth in the state. And I come from Madison, Wisconsin, my hometown, born and raised, in 18 years in the school district there. So yesterday at our leadership team meeting, I shared with members and asked them to share 2 words. And those 2 words were to describe how they felt a year ago at this time, as yesterday anyway. March 16th, 2020 was the day that I addressed them the last time as we cleared our offices for what became known as COVID-19 distance learning and our forced closure. So I asked them to share a word from a year ago and then a word today to describe how they feel. And I invite you to do the same. Personally, professionally, just think back to about a year ago and how you felt then and maybe how you feel now. So I'll pause just for a few seconds as you think about that. Feel free to chat them if you'd like to.
Well, didn't people sort of say in their mind, because a lot of superintendents across the country have shared this, that most of them thought it was temporary, like a few weeks.
We just didn't know. The uncertainty, I think, was something that was most definitely there. For our team, a lot of it was scared, fear, were those first words, and shifted really to hope and optimism. And I think as we transition here with vaccinations and getting back in person, we can all feel that. But there's a lot of work ahead of us as well. But I thought it'd be important to share some of these other challenges within the challenge, because lost in COVID-19 and of course the world international news of that, our district strategic plan, the number one goal is to have a positive school and district culture. And I want to share with you how St. Paul Public Schools entered into COVID-19. Mm-hmm. On February 26, 2020, following 9 months of contract negotiation with our teachers union, I received a notice that I hope no educator, no leader has to either compile or receive. And that was a notice of intent to strike. We had long mediation sessions, again, for 9 months, or contract negotiations for 9 months, and then mediation sessions leading up to that notice of 12 to 18 hours, marathon sessions, days on end. And when you get that notice, there's a 10-day cooling off period, a time for the parties to come together and try to figure out a pathway to prevent the strike. Some of the things that you might want to know, why was there this difference? Well, there was $100 million worth of differences We had an offer that we provided to our 23 bargaining units that was an attempt to be uniform and equitable across the district. And in the last hour, mediation ended and our district was closed to a strike for the first time since 1946. Fun fact, or not so fun, St. Paul was the site of the very first teacher strike in the country, and that was in 1946. So here we are 74 years later, and we've got this novel coronavirus. And I'm a former science teacher, so I pay attention to these things, or I did, back in January and February, on the world news a little bit, and then it got a little more local, as we know. And I remember in some of those groggy, sleep-deprived days, hearing about King County in Washington. I have a couple of colleagues out there, so I reached out to them to understand what was this coronavirus thing and how is it impacting your school districts. And I was very alarmed to hear of the steps that they were taking. It allowed me to try to get ahead a little bit for what we might face as a school district, a state, a community. And if you remember, King County was the place it was very well profiled. The long-term care facility had an infection, and there were several fatalities very early on, and it became kind of one of the epicenters of that early movement. What then came to impact all of us. So this was all going on amidst a strike beginning on March 9th, a day where we had to close our doors. And remember back to our strategic focus area of positive school and district culture. It tested every bit of that in so many different sectors at that point. Parents couldn't rely on their schools for their children to attend. They had to change work schedules. All this sounds familiar in terms of what we now know as the pandemic. But we had to do it earlier, and it was not quite the same when it was two parties who were in a dispute at that time. I'll share with you that week, the governor encouraged us, actually directed us to get back to the table on that Thursday and for the two sides to settle on a contract. He knew that COVID-19 was coming at that time and was very both interested and committed to making sure that we were taking whatever steps we needed to settle our differences. So on Thursday, March 12th, we came together, and Friday morning at 4:30 a.m., yes, in all one session, we signed the end of strike document. And it was in so many ways, it was a relief. And they were by far the most difficult moments I'd ever experienced as a professional, not even close. We met that morning after just a little bit of sleep and held a press conference, a very well-attended press conference. The entire board was with me. Myself and our board chair provided statements, and then we stood for Q&A. And I thought for sure, that this was going to be the most difficult thing I'd ever face, and we were going to turn the corner. I had no idea that difficult experience was soon to be rewritten. In fact, rewritten a few times with what I'm about to share with you. So, like many of you, that weekend or near that weekend, depending on where you are, trying to catch up on sleep, trying to understand what does uncertainty mean, and the work that we do, whether we lead or we're teachers or parents for that matter. I do have a son who's a senior in our school district as well. So, I had many different feelings about what we were going through as a district at that time. That Sunday, our governor did hold a press conference with us, a phone conference, before giving a public press conference, about the need for Minnesota schools to begin planning for distance learning and the emergency closure that was to take place, I think 10 days after the 15th, on the 27th, I believe, if my days are correct. And, I could obviously spend time sharing our experiences during these unimaginable times. But I think one of the important things to share is that here we're coming out of a 9-month journey with our teachers union. And, closing the book on a teacher strike, we had to open a new one on the most unprecedented times in education that I could ever think of. And clearly we were going to have to sit right back down at that proverbial table and begin to understand how we were going to work together. And not just to honor a contract, but to honor the relationships necessary through these times of uncertainty and around prioritizing student needs, both in education, social, emotional, from food service to technology and everything in between. We were going to have to change our district in very short order. And you might remember those early days as it was mentioned earlier, we didn't know how long this was going to last. We didn't know if this was going to be until the end of March, or would it take us until April of 2021 before we were able to bring students back.
So, Joe, did that mean when you went into the pandemic, did you have to satisfy union requirements for people that weren't teachers as well? Are they members of your union, like the food service and all that?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are 23 different bargaining units in our district.
Wow.
So from, teachers that are almost 4,000 to many smaller groups. So I think we did. And many of, for a lot of their language and their duties, it wasn't, it didn't entail that much to provide, safety and allow them and provide guidance for them to come back and perform their duties. But for some where you're changing their everyday work, teaching, it was, we really felt compelled to come back to the table to understand these are our expectations. These are your expectations. Can we find out where we agree so we can do this and do this really well? And I would be remiss if I didn't say it was really hard. And not just coming off a strike, but, I had very high expectations for what we were going to be able to provide eventually in September as we opened in full distance learning. And that wasn't necessarily how our union saw it. So right again, we're in this place of community, kind of loud and two sides that weren't agreeing.
So can we sort of look at that for a second in terms of what your expectations were going in? Because in many districts that we talked to, they were expecting a lot of asynchronous. Yes. Because they already had one-to-one devices and they had teachers who were used to teaching via video, but not necessarily acting like they just took the brick and mortar building and it's now all online. So they're literally on camera like actors all day. They were thinking, okay, 20 minutes, gather the kids for math, give instructions, and then kids go. So there's different ways people approach this. What were your original thoughts? So
I think all of the above. We, went through the spring. We're a one-to-one iPad district and have been for 8 years. So we were a step ahead in title. We had devices and we had an Office of Personalized Learning.
Okay.
And this is not in any way begrudging the work they've done, past or present. But we did not have a very good spring in terms of what distance learning meant for our students in terms of meeting their needs. And I shared with our community that we knew that we were going to be in some form or fashion distance learning in the fall. Whether it was full, hybrid, or we didn't know. Yeah. But I pleaded and shared with our community that it was going to be bigger and better than it was during this emergency closure. So we branded that as Distance Learning 2.0. I should have actually got a trademark on that because many others use that as well. So we wanted to make it better. We wanted there to be a better structure for families, for students, for teachers, for that matter. And it right away led to us forming a memorandum of understanding that was very little time for on-camera synchronous time, much to my chagrin. I wanted far more, not all day, but more than, the little that we ended up agreeing to. So we started, our distance learning discussions for the fall, with a very contentious memorandum of understanding. And it was, again, it put the district and the parents and the students and the teachers in all different places. And, as a leader of an organization this size, my job is to be in the middle and pull people together. So we ended our challenge from the previous strike. And, August, September, we were kind of right back in that same place. And I had made the decision outside of the governor's recommendation to say, we are starting in distance learning. We have 36,000 variables in this district that are moving throughout the summer. When it comes to safety in classrooms, we need to know how many students, where they are. And we would have had so much uncertainty on September 8th that I cannot imagine a safe way that we would have been able to open based on what we knew about COVID then. We've come a long way, but that was a really difficult start for us.
Did you come back in building at all?
So we had started to. We have had a past tense now. We had a stage plan for return to hybrid learning, and we started bringing back our first phase of students, our federal setting 3 and 4, and some of our other individualized programs on October 19th. But then all of you know what happened post October 19th. So we had to put that to rest real early on and go back into distance learning for everyone. Following winter break, or right before winter break, the governor announced his guidelines for elementary students and giving us some opportunity to bring our students back. We made that announcement, and on February 1st, grades pre-K through 2 came back. On February 16th, grades 3 through 5. And then we made the announcement that beginning following our spring break, April 14th, all of our students, middle and high school, will be back full-time in person as well. So it's been just an incredible journey. As difficult as that is, there's a few other things that happen to us that make it even more challenging.
Yeah, it's been your, tribulation year, so to speak, so far, and it's not done. What I want to ask you is, did you feel like you went through sort of a warping of space and time in terms of how teachers were using time? Because that's what we've been hearing all over the country, is that, it's really messed with lesson planning, and that's having a huge impact on achievement, because how you use space and time in a classroom is so different than remote.
And I think we early on try to talk about it in terms of connecting, accessing, engaging, and achieving. And, you can't jump right to achievement. You can't jump to the way that you do things. I remember early on having a discussion around attendance. And I'm like, all of our students are attending. They're where they're supposed to be. I mean, the way we look at attendance in school is, are you in your seat by the time the bell rings? Our kids are at home. So let's not think of attendance in terms of the way that we did post or pre-pandemic. We need to think of attendance in terms of, can our students turn on their device? Can our students access the internet? Can our students engage with the learning management systems that we use, Seesaw and Schoology? And can our students engage with the activities and expectations that are placed upon them? And, I think the staff that were successful were able to break it down in those kinds of chunks and kind of do one before the other. Because if you just jump right into, today, Joe, you've got to do 1.3 through 1.5 and questions 30, and that's your assignment. And you wait for that to be turned in, in an asynchronous environment, that's really hard. I think our teachers and staff that were successful were able to assess every day, our students connecting. What do they need? Is there technology issue here? Can we do some grounding? Can we bring community in and do a morning meeting just to check in? And to me, that was, and staff needed to routinely hear that from me. That was so more important to me than a biology lesson.
That really was what a lot of superintendents were telling us too, is that the come togetherness alone became a huge part of the curriculum.
Right.
And then the academics was secondary.
Yeah.
And more people are saying, I don't really want to talk to you about achievement, because we're just glad to still deliver any learning in such a chaotic time, particularly because every student, or almost all students in America, were inculcated into the agency and the drivers being teacher tells you what to do next.
Right.
And now you have to manage your own time from home, hopefully maybe with a parent's help, but a lot of times not.
Yeah.
And they're not used to it. So just arriving, you're totally right. I'm going to take your definition of attendance and make sure we promote it nationally, because I completely agree.
Yeah, it was really hard. And, of course, the state and, they're looking for measurable, or, the way that we've always charted things. And I'm like, this doesn't work. We're going to, if we check a box saying attendance, we're missing out on what's really happening here. So that was important early on. The other thing is that, we delivered 16 million meals to our families, during this time. And to think about some of the real challenges that folks experienced and continue to experience during this pandemic. I'm just not so sure that the way that we've always thought of school and delivering it in this new way really took that into account in a manner that was equitable or effective. I think we're still learning, ways to improve it. And again, no discredit to anyone. This is that fifth or sixth, reinvention of education that's coming our way. We were forced to do it.
Well, what did you think of the idea of hybrid logistics? Have you heard this idea? Because we were talking about it yesterday, but I don't know if you were on. The emerging idea is the Uberization of learning, which flips the institution. So you're not classroom centric, teachers roam, and you have giant common rooms or house rooms, home rooms. Kids are socially distanced. They're all asynchronous unless they get a pop-up notification saying you're in cohort 1 and you're due in the classroom at 10. Teacher meets you there, comes and gets you if you're a little kid. So it's a complete reassembly of your structure so that everyone's on a different path. And if some kids zoom ahead in math, it's flagged on your analytics. And that kid's told, don't work in math anymore. You're way behind over here in language. So we're going to have a teacher come in and pay special attention to you to catch you up faster. But technically, you could move ahead 2 grades in 1 grade as a student in 1 subject. So that Uberization, hybrid logistics is the, hot thing right now to talk about, because all the things that you're experiencing, a lot of the thought leaders in America have come together and said, how are we going to do this like Uber and Amazon and FedEx can get a box anywhere in the world in 24 hours, but we're not doing it that way. We're still the same system and structure, grades, classrooms, as we've always been. And we really haven't changed that. What would it look like? So what are your thoughts on that? Because you've struggled in every direction, right? Like everything is going on your plate. What are your thoughts on like maybe a new evolution?
Well, I'll start by saying that I think you're right. And I think there's real irony in what you just shared with me about your description of Uberization, is that I think what many of us learned during this time is that we thought we were doing it. We thought that we were offering opportunities. And I think in some ways this catapulted the discussion into a place where we've been forced to truly knock the school walls down and really flatten our organizations, our communities, and find new ways to do the work. So I think it's important, but the system all has to work together in unison as well. If we are going to change how we do things at the school or district level, then the way states account for things like seat time and things like the way that they fund, there's going to have to be some recalibration of that as well. And I think that's where we're going to really need to, at the policy level, spend some time to make sure that districts aren't punished, and that there is an accountability method for students as well. I'd hate to think that our best efforts are ones that also leave behind groups of students. Sometimes our best efforts, as one of my colleagues said recently, can be very helpfully harmful. So we do have to think about that as well.
I love the way you said that. Yeah, helpfully harmful. I would challenge, and I want to ask you about this, whether or not any executive at any state level would dare punish you for seat time today. I don't even know if they were really getting punishing oriented in the past. Were they? How would they act today? Would they really honestly do that to you? Well,
I can tell you up here, it's, if we're short hours and snow days, I have had to do some absolutely
tap dancing.
Won't quite say the words, but to our bell schedule to account for, we had 3 more minutes every day just to make sure we met this requirement. Now, if you ask me, did 3 more minutes of learning help our academic outcomes? We all know the answer to that.
Yeah. I'd like to out some of those people and make fun of them. But I understand. Yeah, you're totally right. There needs to be some sort of a new declaration of independence from the old ways for education. I'm all in on that. Maybe I can help you with that within the Edu Jedi, codify it as like, this is the Edu Jedi manifesto kind of a thing, which would be fun, right? Yeah. Interesting. All right. So continue. Then what happened?
Well, and again, this is a much longer discussion, but I did want to share amongst all these, things that we're dealing with pandemic response. When we had our press conference on Friday, March 15th, whatever day that was, it might not have been, it was the 14th actually. That was the last time I saw our board, as we all dispersed and went our ways. It was also the last time I saw our board chair. Very sadly, about a month in, Marnie Zhang, our 31-year-old Hmong SPPS graduate, daughter of Hmong refugees, was not feeling well. And what became very clear is that she was struggling from COVID, went into the hospital and was placed in ICU and was placed on a ventilator, and sadly never came home. She passed away at 31 years old from COVID-19, right at the heart of our response. And not only that, as she was failing in the hospital and becoming, it was very clear to us how serious it was. Also woke up on Memorial Day, the day after Memorial Day, to the video of the killing of George Floyd that happened just miles from my house in our district. And when you start to compile, or you start to place these other events that are the kinds of things that you need to drop everything you're doing and pay the most close attention to it, to attend to the needs of people, and especially as a CEO of an organization our size. None of the things that we just talked about previously mattered. They didn't. People were hurting, and you can't have an educational system if you're not addressing those real emotional needs that continue to be challenging as we're now going through the days of the beginning of the trial. We still are addressing this uneasiness and tension and unsettledness in our communities, and especially in our communities of color.
Yeah, and you probably experienced some property, losses in your area, which affected families as well. So COVID, and then riots, and then I don't know, I saw something about, Minneapolis, and I think it probably included parts of St. Paul, millions and millions and millions of dollars in damage.
It was far more severe in Minneapolis. And, yes, we had loss here and terrible, but the loss of people's being and their hope in their hearts that's been stripped, some of that's, I'd like to think it's repairable, but it isn't. It was a low water mark in our community that, that we have to continue to address. And in a time where COVID-19 and our response and equitable education, it's all intertwined. Yeah. So we have found a way and have to find a way to bring it to the present, to make sure that we're constantly thinking about the impact of our communities on the way that we're coming back together as an organization.
Yeah. And I'm proud of you for barreling through anyway. We have a minute left. Where's your hope? Like where are you at with what you hope for the future, for your school and district? Because you've been through a lot, you're still standing, super great, right? But if you could just erase all of that and have this nirvana emerge, what would that be? How would everything work?
Well, my hope is this: before the pandemic, in October of 2019, we reorganized our district to create an Office of Digital and Alternative Education. And their first charge for me is get an approved online school ready to go, because I want a 12-hour school day in St. Paul Public Schools. I want our students to be able to use the school day in 4-hour chunks and take classes online, brick and mortar, and in community. Why do we wait for the summer or after school for students to do internships? These are some of the most highly engaging activities our students do, and I know this because I'm on several boards. So I get to see the end product of what our students are doing with our community organizations. And I think it's a shame that we have only a select few because we limit it by time. I think that our school day could look a lot more like some of those out of school time activities that our students do. Mm-hmm. And I want to find a way to deliver that for students in St. Paul Public Schools. Our data says that the way that we do school doesn't necessarily interest too many or enough of our students. And there's other ways for us to accomplish this.
This is awesome. So you're basically wanting to alter time, and I love it. Well, great. Well, I think we need to jump to our next speaker now. But this has been awesome, and I'm going to have you back later today, right?
Right. Sounds good. 3:00.
Okay, so everyone that had a million questions already for Dr. Gothard, did I say that right again?
Gothard, yes.
Dr. Gothard, save him for this afternoon because we're going to pelt him with questions later, and he's going to be awesome as usual. All right, so we're moving right along. Thank you so much, Joe.
Brightspace is a learning management system that makes it easier for you to give each student a more personalized learning experience. And now you can do it with fewer headaches and in less time. It's one platform with a single sign-on to all the tools you need that works on any device and can be used to create a different experience for each grade level. The youngest students can use a portfolio specifically built for non-readers to share what they're learning. As they get older and busier, the activity feed shows them the latest updates to help them keep track of everything that's going on. And no matter what grade your students are in, it's simpler than ever to create lessons and check that content is aligned to standards. You can use materials from publishers, open educational resources, or bring them in directly from Google Drive. The social interface brings it all together in a way that's easy for anyone to use and keeps everyone connected: teachers, students, and their parents. With Brightspace, you'll be able to reach every learner in a way that supports their learning style.